That's the Rand Corporation, 1994. An additional factor is demand-motivated business, but also another contributing factor is poverty in Mexico, which certainly has not been getting better at all. And the United States certainly doesn't have clean hands there as well. We won't go into NAFTA here since that's not what it's about, but with the 2 million displaced farmers when NAFTA came in, Cargill's corn went down, displaced close to 2 million farming jobs. We've seen incidents of crime rise, we've seen incidents of poverty rise, we've seen incidents of the informal economy rise, and incidents of migration rise. You also see more people, when they're looking at all those options, one option that you could turn to is organized crime, drug running, and that's a reality. In looking at everything I just said, probably is not just news for some of you guys, but also not news for some people in Congress. So why do we go forward with this? The colloquial definition of insanity is doing something, seeing it doesn't work, and then doing it again. So either our governmental policymakers, those who represent us in government, are insane, or they've got some hidden vested interests. I put out there it's the latter. I think there's quite a few interests, and we could have a much larger discussion as to what they are. So as with Plan Colombia, there's some vested economic interests. Who's making these helicopters? It's going to be Bell. So not all the money actually goes to Mexico. Some of it goes to different U.S. corporations and stays within our borders. But there's large political interests as well. In Congress, in an election year, you want to make sure that you want to show that you're not weak on crime. You want to make sure that you show you care about Mexico. We have to care about Mexico. There's a serious crisis in Mexico right now. And this was the plan that was on the table. Get behind it, show you're behind Mexico, you're behind regional cooperation, or you're not. There's significant political interest in making sure that you support, as a congressperson, the Merida Initiative. And then yet another one that Leslie already mentioned, which is the geopolitical picture right now, which is that we've got a friend in Mexico, we should take advantage, lock down this relationship, give them lots of military aid when we see that the sea change happening to the south in Latin America. One last little point is also the human rights violations that are expected to come from this whole package. There's quite a few grave projections. The human rights picture in Mexico, from Mexico's own military police, has not been great. There's a lot of different. There's a lot of incidents of human rights violations on the part of Mexico's own military and police. This Merida Initiative would blur the lines between police and military all the more, meaning that more military are doing more police objectives. We've seen throughout the last several decades plenty of that in Central and South America to know that's not a good idea. But also, there's specific incidents of police committing pretty horrible crimes, specifically focused on social movements. In Atenco, a number of people are probably familiar with that case in 2006, when rape and torture, various police officials were using rape and torture against those who were illegally detained involved in a protest in Atenco at that time. In Oaxaca last year is another very common, not last year, 2006, another common example. We were there with our office in Oaxaca at that point. It was like us and CNN. And there was massive amounts of violence, largely perpetrated by the very military and police who are supposed to be protecting the citizens. 23 people were killed, hundreds were detained, many were tortured. One of those killed, Brad Will. His case is still not resolved. At the end of the last year, he's from New York, he's an indie media journalist. As of last year, they arrested someone else for the crime, and then Mexico's own National Human Rights Commission said that's not the guy, that guy is innocent. Because Brad Will filmed his own murder, and you can see a picture of the 4 police and army personnel who killed him. And so this kind of impunity, this is not to vilify the Mexican army, but it's to say that, really, are these the guys that we want to be funneling money to control violence? This is a bull-headed package. One last thing about that I was asked to mention is ILEA. It's a training school in El Salvador. For those of you who haven't heard of it, it's the International Law Enforcement Academy. It's actually 5 different academies throughout the world, one of which is in El Salvador. Its stated purpose is more of the same, fighting narco-trafficking, although the specific statement of the El Salvadoran ILEA is, quote, to make Latin America safe for foreign investment through training soldiers and military personnel. Right now, ILEA has more graduates from Latin America as police members graduating from that school than there are military personnel graduating from the School of the Americas. So we put a lot of attention on the School of the Americas, and that's very important. But right now, with the United States' funding, partially through the Merida Initiative, this new institute that's doing as much or more training of Latin American military and police personnel. And their human rights record, we could go into those details as well, but is not great. 15% of the Merida funds was supposed to be withheld until we could prove that Mexico was complying with human rights standards, that there was transparency, that civil society was having regular meetings to talk about the implementation, that those cases like Brad's case would actually be thoroughly investigated and those responsible would be prosecuted, and that torture would not be used. Those 4 are not being done. Those are not new conditions. It's only 15%, and it's not likely to be enforced as we've seen in Colombia. So, in summary, when I've said all this in the past, I was a couple months ago was on a radio interview where I said all this, and the interviewee was from Sinaloa, Mexico, and she said, "Well, what do you tell my family? What do you tell the people of northern Mexico who are dying every day in this tragic drug war? Something has to be done. What should we be doing?" And my response then and my response now would still be, I would say first off, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that my government is choosing to spend hundreds of millions and spending it on the wrong thing, that they're choosing to waste hundreds of millions that could be going towards better causes, to actually reducing the violence in your country. I said then, and I say now, we are right now funneling 90% of the guns that drug cartels have had decommissioned from them by the Mexico police. 90% of those guns come from north of the border, come from this country. We have how many agents on the border trying to make sure that people from Latin America, people from Mexico do not come north into this country? How many do we have making sure that our guns don't go south? How much funding has been put into this effort? Very, very little. That is where we could start. That would be a starting place. Recognizing our own complicity as the United States for what's going on in Mexico. I would say again, stamping out demand. As long as there are crack addicts in South Central LA, there will be cartels in Tijuana. I worked in LA for a little while. I got to see, I got to know a number of these crack addicts. It destroys lives, not just physically. It doesn't just destroy the body, but the whole prison industrial complex is built on this crack addiction. We filled how many jails because of our drug problem? How many cartels' pockets have we lined because of our drug problem? How long will it be before we recognize it as our drug problem? Once again, as Leslie said, we can't really expect that Obama is necessarily going to change all this. We've got to make him change it. He supported the Merida Initiative, as so many others did. We don't know what's going to happen in 2007, but we do know that's going to require quite a bit of pressure both on Obama and on the Congress to get any real change to happen. Thank you.